Hi, and welcome to our Just-in-Time Learning Series. My name's Sean Harris, and today I'm joined by my business partner, Alex Kmeyer.
Hello, Sean.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Today we want to talk to you a little bit about what we're seeing currently in the market when we look at our preliminary title reports. And one of the questions I want to ask you, Alex, is that we see a lot of short sales still in the market.
Yes.
We see a lot of REOs in the market.
Yes.
And what are some of the issues that people need to be really mindful of as they look at that in today's market?
Okay, well, first of all, I mean, obviously, whenever you're looking at a preliminary title report, you want to look for things that are unusual. But there's two things that kind of stick in my mind that I've seen very recently and can be a problem if you don't know what to look for. So the very first one is what we call a lis pendens, where the seller has actually filed a lis pendens against the bank. And a lis pendens is basically a lawsuit, okay?
Right.
And they filed a lis pendens against the bank. And in some cases, it's kind of a stall tactic to stall the foreclosure.
True.
In other cases, it is actually because there were bad lending practices. And you don't know which, obviously, when you're just looking at the lis pendens, but it is one of those things that you need to be mindful of. The second one is city violations. And the city violations are kind of interesting because it's just sort of an arbitrary thing where if one of the city people are driving by a property and they see excess trash or excess brush, you know, they can file a lien against the property, and the lien could be anywhere from $100 to thousands of dollars.
That's right.
And it continues to mount as time goes by, you know, so if it hasn't been taken care of, it just continues to grow. So it's one of those things that I think you need to really look for when you're looking at a preliminary title report.
And that's something we didn't see in the past.
No, we have not.
Yes.
You're absolutely right.
And those city liens are certainly something that you oftentimes catch.
That's right.
Much more common.
Yes.
The second question I want to ask is a lot of old deeds and lines of credit.
Yes.
And what do people need to be mindful of around that when they're looking at their preliminary title report? What do you see?
So this is an interesting one because I come across this all the time, particularly the lines of credit. You know, back in the refinance heyday, you know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, when everybody was refinancing over and over and over again, we all had lines of credit on our property.
Correct. Yep.
And the lines of credit, when you close them during an escrow process, they're supposed to be frozen and actually closed. And what was happening was that they were being frozen and paid off, but they weren't physically being reconveyed. Okay. So if the homeowner is still in the property, the bank sends them another set of checks and says, your credit line is still available, and they don't know any better, or maybe they do, you know, we don't know which, but they start writing checks again. Yeah. And the next thing you know, you have a credit line that now has the same amount on it as it did when it was supposed to have been paid off, and it was never released.
Yeah. So how does that get handled when it hasn't been reconveyed?
Well, if it hasn't been reconveyed, you obviously have to get a demand to be able to pay it off and then reconvey it. Now, let's talk a little bit about the old deeds of trust, because the old deeds of trust is a little bit different. You know, there are deeds of trust that can be on the property from the 1970s.
True.
And they are not out by time. They have to be, and what I mean by not out by time is there's no statute of limitations. Even though the note may have a 20 or a 15-year time frame, it still requires a reconveyance. And in some cases, those banks are just gone. It could be an old savings and loan.
Right.
Or it could be a private Benny. I mean, so there are things that we can do, but you know what? It's on a case-by-case basis. But what we really need to do is catch them soon enough in the process to be able to deal with them with our, you know, chief advisory title officer. We may have to go back to them and ask them what we can do, or perhaps if it's a trustee that where maybe the people have passed away, they can dig in their old material. But the reality is that it really is about catching these things in the beginning.
Yes.
So we have time to work through whatever the solution might be.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Up front.
Exactly.
Third question.
Yes.
Why is it that the statement of information is such a critical component to the transactions, and it still seems like it's an issue that oftentimes creeps up right at the very end?
That's correct.
And can throw a transaction completely, sometimes even out of the game.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that.
And it is interesting that you bring up the statement of information, because it's one of those things that everybody hears about statements, statement of information. And so it's not really old news, though, because it's a critical piece to the puzzle. When you search a property, you're doing what's called a title search, okay? So you're looking at the records. You're looking at anything that has been recorded. But you're also looking at the people that own the property. So if I have my name is not very common, Alex Kmeyer. If you were to search my name, you would probably be able to see anything that was ever filed against me. But somebody like a John Smith or a Barbara Smith may not. That's a fairly common name. So a statement of information is meant for us to be able to eliminate any possibility of liens or judgments against a person that owns the property, or perhaps against the person that's buying the property.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about how I would think that this would help to resolve issues. One is when you take a listing, when a real estate agent takes a listing, it would be prudent for them to get the statement of information from the seller up front and allow the title company to what we call clear their names. That's just kind of our lingo. But when you also are working with a buyer, to make sure that that statement of information is filled out immediately and that the escrow company gets it to the title immediately so that we can clear their names as well. It can stall a transaction.
Yes.
If we find something, let's say it's a federal tax lien, and we have no way to eliminate it except for by looking at the statement of information, that federal tax lien could cause a major issue, especially if the dollar figure is a large dollar figure, or child support liens.
Yes.
And unfortunately, those people beat to their own drum. And what I mean by that is that they do things in their own time frame. So it could take us 10 days to get the information.
Yes.
And if we're right at closing, that 10-day time frame could throw us out of the game.
Critical piece.
It's a critical piece. Yes. So statements of information, while I know it's kind of old news, it really is a key component to making sure that we can pass free and clear title to the buyer in the timely manner and as efficiently as we need to.
Yes, it's a key point. And what many people aren't aware of is right now we have about 40% of transactions that are currently in the marketplace that fall out or have some type of title issue that's going on. So it is really prudent that these types of information be kind of vetted out in advance.
Exactly.
As much, and I know that you personally really get in, review every preliminary title report before we give that to our business partners. So you're that second set of eyes and really can look and assess in conjunction with the title officer so that you can say, we've looked at that, we're identifying these red flags, these are the things we need to be mindful of. That's a tremendous service to our business partners.
And it does, it takes a little extra time on our part to do it, but it's a critical piece to why we believe that why it's the Fidelity difference, really.
Absolutely.
Is what I would call it, is the Fidelity difference.
Yes.
So, and I'm happy to do it, to be able to look at those.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you. And we absolutely look forward to being a business partner with you and look forward to helping you to successfully close your next transaction by really looking at the preliminary title report with you, helping to clear anything that might prevent that transaction from closing, and help you successfully serve your clients at the highest level. So from all of us here at Fidelity National Title, we want to thank you for the opportunity to take care of your business needs as well as your clients. Again, from all of us, thank you.